So as you just read about, a Jewish man named Jesus who came from the village of Nazareth up in the Jewish settlements of Galilee spread his own interpretation of Judaism, primarily throughout Galilee, but also into Jerusalem in the third decade of the Common Era, or in the 20s of the Common Era. And sometime around the year 30 CE, he was crucified near the city of Jerusalem. Now after Jesus died, the following that he had collected, many of them dispersed, but a core group remained within Jerusalem, maybe 100 or so. And not long after his death, a few of his closest followers, a group of people called the Apostles, said that they had seen him risen from the dead, and that after speaking to him for a while, he ascended to heaven, promising that he would be back. This reinvigorated his group within Jerusalem, and their numbers not only grew within the Jewish capital, they sent out missionaries, spreading the message of Jesus to other Jewish people living throughout the eastern Mediterranean. It should be noted that the Jewish diaspora had begun all the way back during the Babylonian captivity of the 6th century BCE, and by the time we get to Jesus, there are Jews living throughout Anatolia, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Levant. This sect within Judaism got a lot of pushback from more traditional Jews, particularly a man named Saul, who worked tirelessly to stamp out their movement. But sometime around the year 50 CE, about 20 years after the death of Jesus, he had a vision where Jesus came to him and commanded him to partake in his movement. He even gave him a new name, Paul. After this incident, which incidentally took place in the township of Damascus, or at least on the way to the Damascus, Paul met with the leaders of the movement within Jerusalem, and he argued that Jesus' message wasn't just for Jews. It was for Gentiles as well. Gentiles is just the Jewish word for anybody who's not Jewish. Remember the ethnocentrism. Barbarians, Middle Earth, Khoi being the real people. Paul made the argument, and ultimately he made this argument successfully, that Jesus freed the world from the law of the Torah, that people didn't have to follow dietary restrictions or get circumcised in order to be servants of God. In many ways, he changed Christianity from a Jewish sect into a new universal religion, which he spread throughout Anatolia, Greece, and even all the way to Rome. And it's throughout this period of the 50s, while he was doing his work, that we have our first Christian writings. He often wrote letters to different churches to advise them on how to carry on when he wasn't there. These letters will later on become part of the New Testament. Within Judea, however, the population was still chafing underneath Roman rule, and in the late 60s, they violently rose up against their Roman overlords. The response by Rome was to destroy the temple in 70 CE. In the wake of that destruction, many Christians who still saw themselves as intricately tied to Judaism began writing down stories about Jesus they had been telling only orally so far. Between the years of 70 CE and around 100 CE, we have the writing of the 4 Gospels of Christianity, as well as the book of Acts and Revelations. Destroying the temple did not demoralize the Jews of Palestine. They redoubled their efforts, and in the 2nd century once again rebelled. The Romans came down even harder on this revolt, and in 136 CE, after a violent campaign on the part of the Romans, they outlawed the use of the Torah within Palestine, effectively ending Judaism within Palestine for the next several hundred years. They also took slaves, bringing Jews back to Western Europe, beginning the worldwide diaspora that has been part of Jewish identity up to the modern day. In the second half of the 2nd century, so after around the year 150, 160 forward, Christians began collecting the different documents, the different letters that Paul had written, the different gospels that had been written in different places, and putting them together into compendiums, into books. By the time we get to the 3rd century, the 200 CE, there was rather broad consensus on what would go into this new canon of literature, what they would call the New Testament, though it won't be official until the late 4th century.